She asked me in the paint aisle on a Wednesday afternoon, holding a color swatch she wasn't even looking at. "Dean, can you be the father of my baby just for one day?" I'd known Claire Bennett about 4 months. Well enough to know she took her coffee black with 1 sugar. Not well enough for that. I set the box down in my hands. "Only if you tell me why." 3 years before that, a doctor sat me down in a cold little room and told me I was never going to be a father at all. My wife left 11 months later. And now a woman I barely knew was standing in my paint aisle, asking me to be one for a day. Here's the thing. She gave me 3 answers over the next year. Each one was truer than the last. And the realest one didn't come from her at all. It came from a 6-year-old sitting on a stool behind my register. Welcome to Digital Story Corner. In today's video, we're telling the story of a hardware store owner who was told he'd never be a father, and the 6-year-old boy who picked him anyway. Let me back up. My name's Dean Whitaker. I'm 34. I own Whitaker Hardware on Main Street, in a town of 4,000 people in central Ohio, the kind of place where the high school football scores get printed on the marquee outside the bank. My dad opened the store in 1986. I grew up in it. I know where every screw in that building lives. Dad died when I was 26 and left me the whole thing. He wasn't a talker, said maybe 40 words to me on any given day. But he said one thing over and over, and I didn't understand it until this story happened. A kid would come in with a broken bike. Dad would stop whatever he was doing every time. One day I said something about it. He looked at me and said, "Dean, anybody can sell a man a hammer. The job is being here. Same place, same hours every day. So when somebody needs somebody, they know exactly where to find one." He went back to his shelving. "Showing up is the whole trade, son. Everything else is just inventory. Showing up is the whole trade." Now, the part 1 don't tell people. I got married at 28. Her name was Rachel. We wanted kids immediately, both of us badly. We tried for 2 years and nothing happened. So we got tested. It was me. The numbers weren't there. We tried the other roads and none of them took. Somewhere in year 3, I watched my wife look at me across a kitchen table with an expression I'll never forget. It wasn't cruelty. It was grief. She was grieving a kid that didn't exist, and I was the reason. She left 11 months later, married a guy from Columbus inside 2 years. They've got 3 kids now. I don't hate her for it. She wanted to be a mother more than she wanted to be my wife, and that didn't make her a villain. It just made her honest. But something in me shut off after that. I stopped dating, stopped trying. I opened the store at 7 and closed it at 6, for 100 times a year, and told myself that was a life. 34 years old. Never going to be anybody's dad. Everybody in town knew it because everybody in a town like that knows everything. That was me when Claire Bennett walked in. Charlie Bennett was 6. He started showing up in September. His mom worked at the insurance office 2 doors down, and school let out at 3:15, and the office didn't close till 5. There's a gap in there that every working single mother in America knows about. So Charlie sat in my store. First day, he stood in the doorway like he wasn't sure he was allowed. Kid was small for 6, canvas sneakers with a hole starting at the toe. I said, "You lost." He said, "My mom said wait here." I said, "All right." He stood there for 20 minutes, wouldn't sit, wouldn't touch anything. Next day, I dragged the old stool out from the back, my dad's stool, the one he sat on for 30 years, and said, "That's yours." Kid looked at that stool like I'd handed him a car. Second week, I had a coffee can full of mixed screws somebody dumped out. I set it in front of him with 3 jars and said, "Wood screws, sheet metal, drywall. Can you sort?" I showed him. Took 10 minutes. That kid sorted screws every afternoon for 2 hours. Tongue out the side of his mouth, like it was open heart surgery. Third week, I made him a name badge on the machine in back, Charlie, assistant manager, and clipped it on his shirt. Nobody had ever given him a title before. He wore that badge to school every single day for a year. Slept in it once, Claire told me later. That's how it went for 4 months. School bus, my store, the stool, the screws, the badge. He'd tell me about his day. I'd hand him things. Dad's whole trade. I was just there. Same place, same hours. I liked the kid. That was all. His mother would come get him at 5, apologizing every time. Dean, I'm so sorry, he's got to be in your way. He's not. Claire. He's the only employee I've got who doesn't steal. That got me a laugh. First time I ever heard it. I thought about that laugh more than I should have, driving home to my empty house. Claire Bennett was 32. Dark hair, always up in a clip, always moving. That thing single mothers get where they're running a war and smiling through it. She'd been alone with Charlie since he was 2. I never asked about the father. Not my business. For months of that, then the paint aisle. She came in on a Wednesday around 4, and Charlie was on the stool and she didn't go to him. She came down the paint aisle to me instead, grabbed a swatch off the rack, and just held it. I could see her hands were shaking. Then she said it. Only if you tell me why, I said. She let out a breath. Charlie's school, Friday morning. They do a thing called donuts with Dad. And man, I knew exactly what that was. If you didn't grow up with it, it's a real thing. American elementary schools do it. Dads come in at 7:30 in the morning, sit at the little tables in the little chairs, eat a donut with their kid, and go to work. I was that kid once. My dad had a store to open at 7, and donuts with Dad was at 7:30, and he came anyway both years. Closed the store, lost the morning, sat in a chair built for a first grader, and ate a donut with me. Showing up is the whole trade. He's the only one, Claire said, her voice going to nothing. 22 kids in that class, every single one has somebody. A dad, a grandpa, an uncle, somebody. Charlie's got nobody, and he's got to sit there and I can't. She stopped, pressed the swatch to her mouth. I've got no father, no brother, my dad's gone. There's no man in that boy's life except... She stopped again. Except me, I said. She nodded. That was answer number 1. I said yes. Obviously I said yes. But I want to tell you what it felt like. Because you can't see it from outside. I'm a man who was told he'd never be a father. That sits on you at 3 in the morning. And a woman just walked down my paint aisle and asked me to be one for a morning. Not sad. Not weird about it. Grateful. Like somebody handed me a glass of water and I hadn't known I was thirsty for 3 years. Friday at 7:30. I said I'll close the store. Dean, you can't close the store. Claire, my dad closed the store. Friday morning. I put on a clean shirt and sat in a chair built for a 6-year-old with my knees around my ears, and ate a chocolate donut off a paper napkin. About 4 minutes in, it hit me something was wrong. The other kids knew about me. Kid at the next table goes, "Are you Charlie's dad from the hardware store?" I said, "I'm Dean." He says, "Charlie says you have a machine that makes name tags." Another kid goes, "Charlie says you let him use the box cutter," which I did not. But then a little girl says, "Charlie said his dad was going to come. He said it a bunch." Everybody said he was lying. I looked over at Charlie Bennett, 6 years old, name badge on his shirt, sitting up so straight his back wasn't touching the chair, face absolutely glowing, owning that room. And I got it. That kid had been talking about me for months, not making up a dad. He'd been describing me. The store, the stool, the screws, the badge. Every detail true. He'd just been using the wrong word for it. I got through that hour, don't remember much of it. Then I walked out to the parking lot, sat in my truck, put both hands on the wheel, and cried harder than I did at my own father's funeral. Claire was waiting by her car. She'd seen my face. "You knew," I said. She started crying too, right there at 8:15 in the morning. His teacher called me in October. She said Charlie kept telling the class about his dad, and she knew there wasn't one. She thought he was making things up. Claire wiped her face. So I sat him down, asked him, and he told me all about his dad, and it was you, Dean. Every word out of his mouth was you. She was shaking. "I've known since October." I let it happen anyway because I couldn't stand to take it away from him, and I've been so ashamed. Second answer. She hadn't picked me because I was the only man available. She picked me because a 6-year-old already had. Now, you want to know what makes a small town a small town? Word travels. Charlie's actual father found out about donuts with Dad by Sunday. His name was Trent. He lived 2 towns over. 35 minutes, which I want you to hold on to. 35 minutes. He'd left when Charlie was 2. He had a new wife and a new baby, and he had never once, in 4 years, driven those 35 minutes. He drove them on Monday. Walked into my store at 4 in the afternoon like he owned it. Big guy, sunglasses on his head indoors, which tells you most of what you need to know. Charlie was on the stool. I saw the kid's whole body go small. 6 years old, and he knew to make himself small. I said, "Charlie, go in the back and count the paint stirrers for me." Kid went. Good kid. Trent Bennett looked around my store and smiled. "So you're the guy? I'm Dean. You're playing house with my son." Then he did the thing people like that always do. He reached for the truth and pulled out every part that made it true, and held up what was left. "You know what this looks like?" He was loud on purpose. 2 customers in the aisle. 34-year-old guy, no wife, no kids of his own. Can't have kids of his own. Everybody in this town knows it. Dean hanging around some little boy in the back of his store every day after school. He leaned on my counter. "He's mine. You don't get to just take a kid because you couldn't make one." Every word of that was technically true. And every word had been stripped of the only things that made it the truth. That his mother works 2 doors down. That there's a gap between 3:15 and 5. That nobody else was there. That this man had 35 minutes of road and 4 years and never drove it once. My hands were shaking, but I don't raise my voice. So I said it quiet. "Trent, how far is it from your house to here?" He blinked. "It's 35 minutes. I looked it up." I put my hands flat on the counter. "You've had 4 years and 35 minutes of road. You didn't drive it for his birthday. You didn't drive it when he had pneumonia last winter and his mom slept in a hospital chair for 3 nights. The store was dead quiet. You drove it today, 12 hours after you heard some hardware store guy ate a donut with him." I let that sit. "You're not here for Charlie. You're here because somebody else was, and you can't stand what that says about you. You want to not be the guy who left him. And I'm sorry, but I can't help you with that. Only 35 minutes of road can. And you've had it the whole time." He didn't have anything. He said some stuff about lawyers. He never called one. He got in his truck and drove his 35 minutes and has never once come back, which is its own kind of tragedy, and I take zero pleasure in it. But here's what he did do before he left. He put a crack in Claire. She came apart that night on my porch. 11 o'clock, the whole thing. "He's right," she said. "That's what makes it unbearable, Dean. People are talking. I've let my son build an entire father out of a man who's just being nice to a kid in his store. What happens when this ends? Or you meet somebody, or you just realize we're not yours." She was crying. "He's 6. He can't lose a dad twice. I did this. I let it happen because it was easier than telling him the truth. And now I've set my kid up to get destroyed. I could have said a lot of big, romantic things. I said the only true thing I had. Claire, my dad ran that store for 30 years. He wasn't a talker, wasn't affectionate, he was a hard man, honestly. But he opened that door at 7 every morning for 30 years, and every kid in this town knew that if they needed somebody, there was a man behind that counter. Same place, same hours. I looked at her. He told me the whole job was showing up. I thought that was him being cheap about it, like it was a low bar. It's not a low bar. It's the only bar. Trent's the boy's father, and he's got 35 minutes of road. I'm nobody, and I've got a stool." I turned to her. "I'm not going to promise you I'll always be here, because promises are cheap. I'm just going to open the door at 7 tomorrow, and then again the day after." She looked at me for a long time. "You've been open at 7 for 4 months." "Yeah," I said. I have. That's when it stopped being about Charlie. I'm going to be honest about the year that followed, because I don't want to sell you something that isn't real. It was slow, awkward, both of us scared out of our minds. Claire had been left. I'd been left. Neither one of us was going to move fast, and neither one of us was going to move at all as long as Charlie was standing in the middle of it, because a kid's not a reason to get together, and a kid's not a thing you gamble with. So we did it stupid and careful and backward. Coffee for weeks. Dinner after Charlie went to bed with her sister in the living room. A movie in an actual theater like teenagers. There was one night that broke it open. Charlie had strep, and Claire had been up 2 nights straight, and she called me at 10 at night, just to hear a voice. I drove over with soup from the diner and a bag of orange popsicles. She opened the door looking wrecked, hair everywhere, same sweatshirt as 2 days before. You didn't have to do that. I know. And she just went, right there in the doorway, cried like a person who hasn't been allowed to in 4 years. I didn't say it was going to be okay. I stood there and let it be as big as it was. When she got it back, she laughed at herself. God, sorry. I'm a lot. You're not a lot, I said. Claire, I own a hardware store in a town of 4,000 people. I've been alone for 3 years. A doctor told me I'd never have a family. I set the soup on her counter. You think you're a lot? I'm not a little. I'm just quiet about it. I'm not here because you're easy, I said. I'm here because it's 10 o'clock and you called. That was the first night I kissed her. In a kitchen at 10:30 at night, both of us exhausted, kid coughing down the hall. 0 romance, 0 candles. Best 30 seconds of my life to that point. She put her forehead on my chest. I'm so scared of this. Yeah, I said. Me too. Don't be somebody who leaves. Claire, I've never left anywhere in my life. That's my whole personality. She laughed into my shirt, wet, beautiful laugh. Somewhere in there, I stopped being the guy from the store and started being the guy she called first. Which brings me to answer number 3. It was about a year later. Charlie was 7. We were in my kitchen, Claire, me, kid at the table doing homework. Claire and I were doing dishes, not touching, but standing close enough that we both knew we were standing close enough. And Charlie said, out of nowhere, not looking up, Mom, when are you going to marry Dean? Claire dropped a plate in the sink. She sat down and did the thing she'd been dreading for a year and a half. Telling him gently that Dean was her friend and wonderful, but he wasn't his dad, that his dad was Trent, that she was sorry she'd let him tell his class something that wasn't true, and it was her fault, not his. She was crying, trying not to. Charlie Bennett looked at his mother like she was the dumbest adult he'd ever met. I know. Trent's my dad. Claire stopped. I know, Charlie said. I'm not a baby. Then honey, why did you tell everybody at school that? And he said it, 7 years old, total disgust that he had to explain this. Because you can pick. Claire said, Charlie, you can't pick a dad. That kid looked right at me, across the kitchen, pencil in his hand. Why not? He picked me first. I had to leave the room. I stood in my own hallway with my hand over my mouth, and my whole life reorganized itself around one sentence out of a 7-year-old. He hadn't been lying to his class, not once. He'd been choosing out loud every day for months, to anybody who'd listen. He'd looked at a man who had nothing and no one, who'd been told he'd never be a father, who just opened a door at 7 every morning, and a 6-year-old boy had walked in, sat down on a stool and picked him. Third answer, and it didn't come from Claire at all. Claire and I got married the next fall. Backyard, 40 people, her sister crying through the whole thing. Charlie was my best man, 8 years old in a clip-on tie, dead serious about it. The adoption went through the following spring. Trent signed, didn't fight it, didn't come to the hearing. I feel a lot about that man, mostly that he threw away the only thing I ever wanted, and doesn't even know what it cost him. Charlie's 12 now, works in the store on Saturdays, actual employee, actual paycheck, and he's a lazy sorter, and I'm gonna fire him one of these days. Morning of the wedding, he came into my room and handed me something he'd made on the machine in back. letters crooked. It said, "Dean Dad. I still wear it every day in the store. Here's what I've got." She came down my paint aisle and asked me to be a father for one day, and I told her she had to tell me why. The first why was a school breakfast, sweet and true, and nowhere close to the real thing. The second why was that a boy had been describing me to his class since October and calling it his dad, truer still, but not it. The real one was this. My father told me the whole job was showing up. Same place, same hours, every day, so that when somebody needs somebody, they know where to find one. I thought that made me small. I had it backward for 34 years. Trent Bennett could have made a son. He did make one. That's not the hard part. Biology is easy. The hard part is being there at 3:15 every day, with a stool and a jar of screws and nothing in it for you. A doctor told me I'd never be a father. He was right about the only thing he actually knew, and dead wrong about everything that matters. Because a 6-year-old kid walked into my store looking for somewhere to sit, and looked around at the whole world of men who could have been his, and picked the one who'd never left. She asked me to be his father for one day. He'd already decided I was, back in October. I was just the last one to find out. Open the door at 7. That's all any of us can do. If this story moved you, subscribe to Digital Story Corner and hit the bell. A brand new story drops every single day.